if you have certain thoughts or certain frustrations, or I think it's more about what you want to stand for as a person and trying to see with what photographs, in the end, you made the photographs. So probably you find something in there that you can connect to a certain feeling or a certain idea.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Payne, and this is episode 475 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen, the photography podcast where we dig into the creativity, the mindset, and the craft that drives photographers to make exceptional work. Before we get into today's conversation, I have a quick reminder that entries for the 2026 Natural Landscape Photography Awards close on May 31st. We have over $16,000 in cash prizes, a raw file review process, and the ultimate recognition, inclusion in the annual Fine Art Book. No AI composites, no shortcuts, just field-crafted photography. Head over to the show notes and find a link. Today's guest is Hanneke Van Camp, a Belgian photographer based between Europe and Arctic Scandinavia. Hanneke brings a rare combination to her work: a biology degree, a postgraduate focus in science communication and conservation photography, and years of deep seasonal immersion in the landscapes of Northern Europe. She won the NLPA Project Award in 2025 for her Sápmi Living Landscapes project, a long-term body of work exploring the land, culture, and identity of the indigenous Sami people. It is exactly the kind of committed, purposeful photography that this award was built to recognize. We covered a lot of ground today: presence over production, what living seasonally in the Arctic teaches you, how to tell a culturally rooted story with integrity, and why printing still matters in a world built around screens. All right, let's dive into my conversation with Hanneke Van Camp. All right, Hanneke Van Camp, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. First of all, your project that you entered into NLPA last year was amazing. I'm pretty sure your reindeer photo was like top 5 image for me. Like, it just was mind blowing. So congratulations.
Thanks a lot. I was doubting a lot putting that in a landscape competition, but yeah, happy you liked it.
So glad you did. That's so amazing, especially in the context of a project or a stories.
Yeah.
But yeah.
True. Yeah. We'll talk more about it, but the reindeer and the landscape, it's just intertwined so much there. So it also made sense from that side of things.
Yeah. So for people that aren't familiar with you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us who you are?
Okay, so I'm a nature photographer. I have a biology background and also a background in science communication. I worked as a travel agent for a while as well. And that all led to me now being a photographer. I love it a lot. It's my passion. Nature is my passion. I also, when I'm not photographing, love to go running. And I just like to be outside as much as I can. And for the past 4 years, my partner and I have a husband, and we've been traveling through Northern Scandinavia with our camper van, just being close to nature and trying to live a more simpler life, I guess. Yeah, so that's me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of photographers have that science background. I find that it can be a really valuable asset in terms of helping you notice things in the landscape or in nature that other people might not take interest in, but then also being able to weave those stories into the image making, I think, can be really valuable.
Yeah, and I think it's also more or less logical because if you're into nature photography, you're also into nature. I think that's almost a given. If you're not into nature, then if you're only after the photos, then I think you won't last long. So if nature is your passion and you're trying to decide what to do at university or what to study, then it's not, I guess it's normal that it's common that a lot of nature photographers have a biology background or a background in science. But I didn't start studying biology because I wanted to become a biologist. I actually wanted to become a journalist. And I remember sending an email to an editor of a newspaper here, asking them like, oh, I really want to become a journalist, but I also have a passion for nature. What are you looking for? Would it be interesting to study something more science related or biology? And then from that context, become a a science communicator or a science journalist? Or does it make more sense to go and study journalism? And they replied, and they were really nice about it. And they just said, follow your passion. And that's the type of people that we need, people with background knowledge or people with those skills as well. So that's what I did.
I love that. So I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about the travel agency side of things. Like, how has that played a role in the way that you pursue photography?
Yeah, well, after studying biology, I did a postgraduate in science communication just because I still wanted to pursue the communication aspect of it. But after graduating, I worked at university as a science communicator, and I didn't feel passionate anymore. And that's when my partner and I started traveling. We went to Australia and New Zealand for 4 months, just to experience something and to get out of the rut, or I don't know how to say. Being there, I just was so happy that I thought when I came back, I'm just going to try this and see if I can be a travel agent and see if I can make other people feel happy. And that's why I started doing it. And then I also became passionate about trying to do it in a more sustainable way. And I think you can only reach that or try to make an impact if you do it from the inside, and if you try to make people more aware of things and make them see the value of travel more, rather than just being dropped somewhere and experiencing the same things everyone experienced, but just being out of your comfort zone and knowing what it is to really travel or to respect the local environment or people or cultures and things like that. And also to do it in a more responsible way. So I didn't do it for that long because then I shifted to photography. But it was, in one way, it was pretty naive to get in it, thinking it's not that you can't have an impact, but you notice that some people just want to go to Lapland and meet Santa Claus and be done with it. But on the other hand, it's nice to be part of something that people enjoy and that maybe leaves an impression that lasts.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So let's talk about the science background. I mean, I know we touched on it a little bit, but I'd be really curious to hear how that academic foundation has helped shape the way that you approach storytelling through your photography.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's just coming from a passion for nature, loving to be outside, and just by studying biology, and it's actually quite similar to starting photography. You start to notice different things, like the changing of the seasons, and because you learn about all these processes behind it and about different ecosystems and habitats and things like that. And that way, when you travel, you really start noticing that. And it's the same with the camera. Just because you have the camera and you're looking everywhere to see different things or to find details, you start to see which trees are often together, or plants, or you start to notice things more. And I guess you take the knowledge you have from studying biology and then also from science communication, and you also see what an impact photos can have in conservation, just connecting people to certain places or certain environments. And you try to take that and translate that in series or in a photograph or in a story you want to bring or you want to tell.
Curious, like, at what point did you realize that you wanted your photography to be more about this storytelling or conservation aspect versus what I think the vast majority of nature photographers do, which is to just kind of collect images that you are happy about? Like, what was that shift for you? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think for me it's still both. I like to go out with the camera and don't feel the pressure of working only on projects or on stories. Or I also just like to go out and see something I like and take a photo of it and be happy with it. But at the same time, it's also just really inspiring to work on a project or a story and to go really deep into that. And even if you just take pretty pictures, it's also a good way to communicate a story, because sometimes when you put them together and you start to work more on it and people connect with it and they see maybe links to certain environments or certain images or contrasts or things you put in there, then that can also in the end leave an impression that has a meaningful outcome. So it doesn't always have to be, I think, like a forest that's been, how do you say, that's been turned down. Yeah, indeed. It can also be beautiful old growth forest with lots of different species in there, and just show what that looks like. so that people see the difference when they're walking around in a forest that's more like a plantation. It doesn't always need to be the direct human impact. I think it can also still be beautiful photographs. It's just important to think about, what do I want to tell with this story, and what do I want to reach, and what do I want people to see or to feel from this.
I'm always curious, like if you're a photographer that has a lot of photographs, like over a 10, 20-year career of just, like you had just said, like collecting images that you found beautiful, which I think that's pretty much me. What, like if someone's looking to find ways to make those connections in their own body of work, what are some practical things that we can do in order to like help make those connections or find similarities within the photographs we've captured that might be a little bit more than just single images? Like how do we find those connective tissues?
I think it's what is close to you. I mean, if you're thinking about if you have certain thoughts or certain frustrations, or I think it's more about what you want to stand for as a person, and trying to see with what photographs, in the end, you made the photographs. So probably you find something in there that you can connect to a certain feeling or a certain idea. And then also I think, it's if you're, for example, someone that loves to go on top of a hill to look out over a landscape. I mean, some people love to do everything. They want to be in the forest. They want to make these microscopic or macro photographs. Some people like to be on top of a hill and look out over a landscape. If you're someone that goes up a lot of the time and look out over nature or over forests or mountains, or I think you can start with choosing photos that have that same connection, and then go from there. What do you feel when you're when you're looking out over a landscape, or when you're on top of a hill? Things like that. Find things that are close to you, and I think when you're doing this for quite some time and you have a body of images, you will find those connections, and you will also notice what do I love to do if I have a day off and I can go out with the camera? What do I like, and what do I think others should know or think about, and then I think you can find those connections in your photographs.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like what you said about thinking about either an emotional tie-in or a subject or a point of view. I think if you start narrowing things down into those different categories, you'll probably start to find things that have overlap in that way. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I
So,
also loved your series of, with carved aspen trees.
yeah, that was fun. I just felt super like inspiration struck me. Like I was, like you said, like I felt something. I felt like I needed to show the world how I felt about that situation. And I think over the course of an hour, I captured those images, and I just wanted to like showcase these tree carvings in a beautiful way, but also in a way that made people go like, well, that makes me feel uncomfortable.
But I also like that you kept it open. You could have also titled it Destruction, or I don't know, but it was more of an open question.
Yeah, I mean, I think my opinion was
Clear.
filtered through a little bit for sure, but
Yeah.
I did want to leave it a little open-ended for the viewer to be like, I'm not sure how I feel about this, and instead of me imposing that upon them. But yeah. So I know you're living in Belgium. What is it about Northern Scandinavia that's caused it to be your second home?
I think it's not that I don't like Belgium. There's lots of nice places here, lovely cities, but it can feel like a conjunction of cities, and so everything is so fragmented here. So you can have a beautiful nature reserve, but it would be really small. And when you go to Scandinavia, you have the opposite. You have these small villages or a few cities, but then everything else is connected, and it's this big open space. So and it's not only that, we also have the freedom to roam there, the allemansretten, which means, of course, you have to still think about certain things and see where you walk and things like that, and where to put your tent. But the fact that you can just go anywhere and almost camp everywhere really gives you a feeling of freedom. And that's something that's just impossible, for me at least, to get here. When we came back from Australia and New Zealand, we had a really hard time being home again. And that's when we started going out every weekend. We put a little mattress in our car and went to all these different nature reserves in Belgium and the Netherlands, and just trying to find that same feeling or the same spark or inspiration that we had when we were in Australia. But it was really difficult. And then we started saving up all our holidays to go to Scotland, which in the end felt like a mini Scandinavia. If you then go to Sweden or Finland or Norway, you get the same feeling as in Scotland, but then it's just so much more vast and big. And yeah, so that's how we ended up there.
Yeah, and not only that, but I feel like, I don't know, a lot of Scandinavia feels very pristine to me in terms of like
Yeah.
not a lot of people have turned their attention towards it with the camera. It still feels like there's a lot
Yeah,
of undiscovered country and a lot of subject matter that's just kind of waiting to be discovered and showcased.
yeah, exactly. You have certain spots that are really well known and photographed, but there's a lot of places where you're also totally free to take any photo you want, and you won't find 1,000 of the same images on Instagram. You can just go somewhere and be totally surprised. And if you start hiking and you can just go on and on for hundreds of kilometers and you don't see anything. If you're the mountain chain between Sweden and Norway it's so beautiful. It's an incredible area and it's so big that there's endless opportunities to photograph, and you don't have the pressure of or the images in your head that you think, oh, I don't want to take the same one. You're just totally free to be inspired by what you see, and that's a fantastic feeling. And it's also you're alone in most of the time, so that's a nice perk as well.
Speaking my language.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So I know that you spend a lot of your time in the Arctic, Europe. What does living seasonally in the north teach you that shorter trips never could?
Yeah, I think it takes a bit of the pressure away because you're just there all the time, or not all the time. We spend 8 months per year there. So it's still 4 months in Belgium as well, but you're more free. It's not like, oh, in 5 days I have to pack my bags and in those 5 days I have to do this and this and this. You can just leave that pressure and see what the week gives you or what the next few weeks give you. And it's nice to be able to do that because sometimes you also feel like when the weather is super nice photography wise, especially in summer when it's like midnight sun and you're photographing through the night, and you also like that the weather sometimes that it's raining for a week, or that you just can rest up and don't feel that pressure of going somewhere and having to take the photographs in a few days. And more than that, it's also you can see the seasons change. They also describe 8 seasons up north, which is pretty cool because you have such a big difference between summer temperatures and winter temperatures. So last month, for example, it was minus 40. I don't know if that's the same in I don't know.
It's very cold.
Yeah, for sure. And then last summer we had plus 30 degrees, so it's 70 degrees difference. So that makes it makes it shift a lot. So that's why they have a pre-winter, so a winter, a spring, winter. You have every season has been cut in two. And being there longer, you can just experiencing it more and notice different things. And even if you move for 4 hours, for example, it can be autumn in 1 week somewhere, and then if you move yourself, you can have another week of autumn somewhere else. And if you then move, you can extend autumn a little bit longer. So it's super nice to have that flexibility.
Yeah, that sounds amazing to me. And I'm guessing there's a few people listening that are wondering what I'm wondering, which is like, you spend 4 months out of the year in Belgium, 8 months out of the year in the Arctic. How do you make that work financially? Like, do you guys like spend one of those months in Belgium robbing banks, or like, what does that look like in terms of making it work financially?
Well, I think it's also because of COVID that this is now possible. Just because after that it was possible for my husband, Arne, my partner, to work remotely. So he used to work for Nike actually, and now he switched to something else, but he's a project manager. So we do work during the week there.
Gotcha. So he's connected like via Starlink or whatever all the time.
Yeah. But he has a great job and he has a lot of flexibility and a lot of trust there. So that's nice. So if it's a beautiful morning or evening, or there is some flexibility there. And for me, when I stopped at the travel agency to go and pursue this, I did some other freelance work. For example, I annotated heart rhythm data, which I could do from at any time of the day and from any place I wanted. And now the last months leading up the book coming out, and now after the book, I've just been full-time working doing photography. But as you know, it's not easy all the time to get enough out of it. So it might be that I just take something else freelance. I'm not sure. For now, it's okay, but it's not. It's difficult to get a steady income out of it.
Yeah, but like having that flexibility
Yeah,
is
worked a
almost
lot.
priceless, you know?
Yeah, it's true. Definitely. Yeah, we're so grateful. We're still, when driving home now, we're just, sometimes we say to each other, like, as long as we can do this, we're just super
Yeah,
happy that it's possible.
totally, totally. So I know that in the past you've spoken about shifting from chasing photos to being more fully present in the moments that you are witnessing. I'm curious, when did that shift happen for you? When did you first notice it?
Yeah, I think when I first started taking photos, I was always super frantic. I loved sunrises. I still do. I know you sometimes, I've heard you say on the podcast, you have to be able to make photographs at any time of the day in any weather conditions. I'm not the type of person. I just love sunrises a lot. And I used to, when it was a beautiful sunrise, I used to run around with my tripod, with my camera, being really frantic about it, which is not so great if you want to immerse yourself and just also have a nice experience, because you just end up being stressed, and sometimes you don't even like the photos that much, because if you move from one area to another, you end up missing a lot as well. And just by slowing down and enjoying it a lot more and staying longer in the same place, giving yourself that flexibility, it's so much nicer to just be outside and enjoy what you're doing and look around. And then, yeah, I think it's more intentional approach, and it's super nice to then get the camera and look around and see what you find and then start photographing. Also, I mean, last month I went up the same hill 15 times in a row almost. And it doesn't matter if you miss something, because you can just go back the next day. And if it inspires you, it also doesn't matter that you go and do the same hike. I don't know how many times, because you can just enjoy and see what inspires you. And then the other day you go back and you look at the other.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but one of the things I love about photographing in the Arctic in January, February is like it's basically sunrise for 4 hours. You know what I mean?
True.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. I think that's one of the main reasons I love going there. Not only in the winter, but if you go back in summer, the whole night is just so beautiful. You get the same as, it's not the same as in winter in terms of softness or these blue and pink pastel colors, but you get the golden light for, I don't know, 6 hours in a row if it's a nice night, and you can just keep photographing and you get deconnected from time almost. You see people at 2 o'clock in the evening going for a bike ride and things like that. It's a super nice feeling, because of the freedom to roam. You can go anywhere, and it also feels like you have the freedom of time, because it's light the whole day.
Yeah, and it's such a gift in terms of giving you the ability to slow down, and takes a lot of pressure off. Like every time I go to Norway, I'm like, I'm used to being here in Colorado where it's like you have like 10, 15, 20 minutes of good light. You know what I mean? Good light, in terms of like golden hour or whatever. And then you're in Norway and it's like, oh God, we gotta get the photo. We gotta go. It's like, yeah, no, it's gonna be there for like another 2 hours, 3 hours. It's like, we're good. It's so nice.
Yeah. No, it really is. And when the weather cooperates, it's even when the sun doesn't come up, it's so beautiful, because everything is just so soft. And yeah, if you watch the movie Frozen, it really looks like that a lot of the time.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I really love about your work is just how soft it feels. Like it has like it's just super clean, super quiet. How do you allow that softness to speak in those environments? Like, what does that look like for you?
I think for me, it's really important that it's that way. It's just because, when you're there, that is probably the most important feeling you get, like this peacefulness and just this openness and this room to breathe. Like, and that's what I try to translate in the photos. I don't want super dark photos or contrasty, or because that would just contrast, I guess, with the feeling you get when you're there. Just because, you try to translate that feeling of stillness or of calm or into your photos. And I think that's a nice way of doing it, just because the light is like you said, it's super soft a lot of the time. So it's also in a way easy to do it like that. Even when it's like a snowstorm or a lot of wind, the photo you described with the reindeer, it was proper storm. It was super windy, but that creates this really soft, almost foggy conditions because of the snow blowing. And it's the type of photography I also like to look at. And so I always find it difficult. I love seeing really contrasty photos from other people. But for me, when I try doing that, I always get lost in editing or in, because I don't know if I mentioned that in the when I filled in the form before, but I also have a photography degree, so for that I had to do a lot of different things and try a lot of different things. I also had to do study photography, portrait photography, and things like that. So you really tap into, or you try to do so many things because you have to. And then you also learn the things that you love the most of, or you're most confident in, or just the things that are closest to you.
Or if it just feels right. It's you put on a pair of shoes and you're like, oh, that just doesn't feel right. And then you put on a different pair of shoes and you're like, yep, that's the one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. From a more practical perspective, in terms of editing, I know, the scene itself lends itself oftentimes to a softer edit naturally, but I'm curious, what does that look like for you in terms of your workflow? I mean, you don't have to give us all your secrets, but I'm just curious, like, are there certain techniques you're using to modify your raw file to get that softer look, or what's your approach to that?
But yeah, I guess I always edit in Photoshop because that's just what I'm more used to. Not to say that I do a lot of editing. It's not that I do certain techniques or whatever. It's just whenever I try to make whenever I photograph, I try to make it that it's not super dark, and most of my photos don't have a lot of contrast. So if you look at the histogram, you get everything is really close together.
I was gonna say it's like a big spike right in the middle.
No, that's exactly it. And then it's easy. I mean, I also work with white balance a lot because I like getting the colors as close to what I want to reach in the end. And then most of the time I have a pretty clear idea in my mind, and I want it to look as close to what it was when I was there. But I also want it to be, that it works in a series or in a project. I also work a lot with
consistent.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. It's interesting you said that because I just got back from Yellowstone in winter. It's gonna be funny because this episode comes out like at the end of May or something. So like winter, what? But yeah, literally 2 weeks ago I was in Yellowstone in winter, and I did a lot of forest photography, and I found myself really gravitating towards editing them to where I was like pushing everything really far to the right on the histogram and like lifting a lot of the blacks and the shadows. Like I wanted everything to feel softer and more ethereal and not as contrasty as I maybe normally would push for. And so it was really fun giving myself permission to play that way, because I'm usually like the opposite. I'm like, contrast. I love contrast. So it was fun to do that.
Yeah, no, and I saw the photos, and I think, or the ones that you put on the website, and they're really nice. Yeah, and it's also a matter of, it's also probably why I love photographing in the morning, because if you photograph in the middle of the day, you will get a lot of contrast and higher dynamic range. So that's also why I generally don't do that.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about your project, Sápmi Living Landscapes. Amazing work. What was the initial spark behind the project, and maybe tell us a little about what the project is trying to say?
Yeah. So as I said, we started to go for longer periods to Northern Scandinavia. So Norway, Sweden, Finland. And that region is called Sápmi. It's because we have the only indigenous people of Europe there, the Sami. I think that's the same in America and Canada. There's a lot of conflict there also. But they were there first. They didn't, how do I say, they don't own the land. The principle they have is the land owes them. But then when the European settlers came there, it's of course a different story, and it creates a lot of conflict because basically they got colonized. But the area still looks pristine. It's beautiful. There's so much nature there, and it's also because they've been living there for so many years, not having a huge footprint and not making all those roads and infrastructure and things like that. The reason why there's also a lot of conflict there now is because they're opening new mines, they're drilling for minerals and things like that. A lot of the wind farms are going there. It's like this big open space, and now Europe thinks, oh, that's a good area to put everything. A lot of the Sami people, they used to be nomads. Now they have houses, and most of them work a normal job. They have their own parliament. In Norway, they have one. In Sweden and in Finland, doesn't necessarily mean they get a say into actual governmental things. They used to have no borders, so it was one region. Well, now there's clear borders, which made it difficult in some periods of time for the reindeer migrations. So it's a bit of a difficult story, but just going back there, not knowing a lot of it in the beginning and starting to learn more and talking with them. And we also joined the reindeer migration last year, which was incredible. Just made us fall in love with the area even more, because you got this really deep culture that is rooted in nature. And it has this really close connection to the land and to the landscapes, which I found really inspiring. I think you can also, if you do certain hikes or if you're in certain areas, you can walk for 100 kilometers and you still see it's not that they have villages with roads and things like that, but there would be a cabin or some small things or pits or whatever so you see there's traces of them everywhere, but it's not the same as what we have created. I wanted to do something photography wise there with the landscapes and with nature, because that's what I love to do. But I also wanted to make a link to Sapmi, because it frustrated me before when I worked as a travel agent that everyone goes to Lapland or Lofoten and nobody seems to even know what it means. I mean, Lapland is a tourist destination, but the real name is Sápmi, and Lapland actually comes from, it's like a denigrated term for, it's like when they used to call the Inuit Eskimos.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, but we still use it because everyone knows it as a tourist destination. And people go there and they go with the huskies and with the snow scooters and sometimes they will visit a reindeer farm. But sometimes they don't even know if they're in Sweden or in Finland or they went to Lapland, they did that, crossed it off the list. But with this project, I just wanted to Sapmi in the name because I thought it was important to get people more acquainted with it and maybe look something up or be interested in it, gave a bit more context to it.
And I did a little bit of research when I first read about your project when you submitted it, and it includes part of northern Russia as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that's super difficult now because the border is completely closed. So there's some Sami at the Russian side and some at the Norwegian side, and or Finnish, and it's just not possible to cross anymore. And it's in the past, it's been like that between Sweden and Norway too, that they just closed the border and the reindeer couldn't migrate anymore. And that's also something I often think about. We drew these artificial lines on maps, but nature doesn't know borders, and it's strange to think that there's a different, there's a different plan about nature conservation in Norway, for example, than in Sweden or it's all super connected.
Mm-hmm.
But we as humans decide to fragment everything,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy to me. But yeah, I just wanted to focus some attention on it. And, we were doing a presentation about the book at a travel company I worked with, and they're really fantastic people, but they even switched the name of the presentation to Lapland. Yeah, and I mean, I was so far, not the title of the book, but I think the title of the presentation was something like From Northern Lights to Midnight Sun, and it started with Sapmi. And I thought, put Northern Lights in there, put Midnight Sun in there. People that go to a travel event for Scandinavia, they will know it's in the north. But no, they had to switch it. And I explained to them, no, I want them to know Sapmi and I want them to know what they're going to experience if they're going there. They changed it. So it's also part of the project, trying to explain a little bit and to make people know that there's also this huge cultural part when they go there. And
yeah. I don't know a lot about the Sami people. I do know that there's a lot of parallels between what happened in Canada and the United States in terms of indigenous cultures being like oppressed, but also like they tried to absorb them and force them into us and go to education camps and force them into schools and completely desecrated their culture and tried to, basically colonize them and force them to follow our culture and things like that. But then I guess now over the last maybe 15, 20 years, at least in Norway, there's been a big switch in terms of like giving them a little more rights and like honoring their more traditional dress and their cultures. And I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about what you've learned about those cultures and how that's tension exists between European culture and Sami culture.
It's true to say that there's been a time exactly as you described that they had to go to normal schools. They couldn't speak the language anymore. They were not allowed to speak the language, things like that. And it's a lot better now. But still, if you talk about Norway, there's this big project there now in Rappafjord, I think it's called. They're going to open a new mine or want to open a new mine. They want to dump waste in the fjord. I mean, these things are happening, and it's not only got consequences for the Sami people, but it's also for the environment and so a lot of the causes that are important for them are actually super important when you look at it from a conservation perspective. So yeah, they get more, how to say, they have their own parliament, and so they can make advisory papers together or things like that. But it's not that they get an actual vote. So it's not an ideal situation. It can always be better, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Yeah, so from a photography perspective, in terms of incorporating the cultural aspect, how did you approach telling that story from a respectful point of view?
Yeah, I think it's talking with a lot of people, but also I'm of course not a member of the Sami community, and I also don't want to tell their story for them. Not at all. I just wanted to create more awareness, I guess, and just try to add that educational aspect in a way to the photos, just because, like I said, their whole culture is also centered around nature, as it is with a lot of indigenous people. And I think by putting the focus on that too, it's not that I'm going to take portraits of the Sami communities and people, but I do want to not stay silent about it. It would be strange to make a photo series of Northern Scandinavia and not, everything is so connected that it makes sense to also try to tell that story, but just from, I have Sami friends, and like I said, we went on the reindeer migration with them and things like that, but you don't want to tell the story for them. That's also not right. But it's more finding a way to photograph what you're passionate about, but to also, I guess, try to communicate things that you find important to communicate and put those two together.
Yeah, and I mean, the work that you're doing leans more towards documentary. I'd be curious to hear you talk a little bit about how you balance artistic expression and your artistic interpretation with that documentary responsibility in a project like yours.
Yeah, I think documentary responsibility is probably right, but it's also still not journalism. I mean, I don't pretend to have all the facts or put every aspect in there, or I don't feel that responsibility in that way. But I do want to, as I said, I do want to communicate a broader picture and not only talk about nature or mountains just because that's what I love most. I just want to tell the story about a place, and that includes the culture and everything that's happened there. It's not only the hike you do in the morning, but I also don't feel like I have to be the journalist that talks about everything and gives the whole story from 5 different angles. That's also not, I don't feel obliged to do that either,
Maybe that leads me to a follow-up question. If someone's looking at your body of work from there, what do you hope that they take away from it?
I hope they just feel as inspired as I am when you're walking around there. And it's such a stunning area, and it has so much contrast from the polar night to the midnight sun. It's such an inspiring place to be, and I think if people can feel that, and that makes them want to do some research and wants to go there, and of course show respect for nature and all those things. But I think that's the most important. Sometimes also connecting with nature to photography makes you appreciate nature at your doorstep even more. So it's also not about certain locations, but just a certain feeling you get when you're outside.
I love that because, as you know, one of my pet peeves is how people make this artificial connection between very specific locations and a product that they're creating with camera, right? And I think looking at nature photography as some kind of resource that needs to be extracted and delivered is maybe not the best approach. I think a better approach, as what you're talking about, is being inspired by photography and then letting that be fuel that fuels your passion to translate places where you live or things that you find interesting. It doesn't have to be 2,000 miles away. It can be 50 miles away, for example. But I think understanding that you don't have to go to all these checklisted places that you're found online, Instagram and geotagged. Like it's okay to go to other places, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's probably the same for you in Colorado, but it's also the more you get to know something in depth, the better your photographs will be. And if you're just hopping on a plane and going somewhere and taking a photo of something that you think I want to see this, or I need that, or I want this certain image, you probably will enjoy it less, but you won't make something that's unique or that is true to you, or you know, when you get to know a certain place, you still every week I'm there, or every year, if I look back at certain images, you know, you start to see different things, and you start to you know, to progress. And I know you love photographing fall in Colorado the most, I think you said. And I guess every fall you go back, you see different things, and maybe you get better at it, and you develop a certain workflow or style that evolves every time. And it's you don't have that if you just go one place in one season and then try something else next.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially if you want to have longevity in photography, which, you know, I think for a lot of people, to be fair, they get to do this stuff maybe 2 or 3 times a year and they want to make it, you know, make the most of it. And so I think a lot of people in their mind, that means going to a location that's target rich with someone who knows it well. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, like my job wouldn't exist if those people didn't exist, right? So like, I'm not saying this is a bad thing necessarily completely, but I do think that at some point it's important, if you want to take photography more seriously, to like move past that in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, not everyone lives in the same places. It's like I said, I also find it difficult to find the same inspiration here as I do in the north. But still,
Sure.
if you decide to go out, you will have a great morning, and you will find interesting things and notice different things. So it's also a matter of just wherever you are, not waiting for that one holiday, or, you know, just going out and see what inspires you. Because yeah, but it's true. We used to do that too when we had normal jobs. We saved our holidays to go out and then be somewhere and try to be at as many beautiful places as possible. And there's also nothing wrong with that. But you know, it's difficult to really tell a story, or to progress, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's funny you mentioned being local. Yesterday, I don't drive a lot when I'm at home, but like I had to drop my tax paperwork off to my accountant. And I wish I had my camera with me, because where I parked my car, I got out of my car and I paid the parking meter. And I looked down and there was like all of this fragmented ice on the curb, like literally the curb of the road. And I was like, oh, I wish I had my macro lens right now. But I mean, literally, you could find stuff like that everywhere. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to travel halfway across the world to find things that are interesting, that are inspiring to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah.
Yeah. So you've mentioned this a couple of times now, that you've created a book out of this work. I would love for you to talk a little bit about what the process of creating the Sapmi book taught you about sequencing, narrative, and long-term commitment.
When we started this, so I did it with my partner. I did the photography and he wrote the text for the book. And it was just super nice to have to do something together, I guess. And we had this idea for a long time. And then just because I think when we started we bought the camper van and we started going there for really long periods. We knew we wanted to make a book out of it, just from prior holidays and spending a lot of time there and camping and hiking. But it evolved so much over those years, from the title even to the concept to what was going in there. But I think the thing that struck me the most is the contrast that you get there. I've mentioned it a few times, but you get not only the beautiful light, but just the really cold, long winters, and then the summers that are a lot warmer when the sun doesn't set. So I really wanted to do something with those two things, just because that's also a bit of the, how do you say, the constant in what I love. Just, you know, when you go camping and you haven't had a shower for, I don't know, a week or so, and then you get into the shower and you love it even more, just because, you know, you have that contrast. So, you know, I really want to do something with that. And so we came up with the idea, because I love shooting in the morning. And during nights, with the midnight sun, you get these more golden, warm tones. And then you also, in winter, when the sun doesn't rise, you have these more blue, cold colors. So I really wanted to do something with those two colors, and that's how we started thinking about it. We also, and I can recommend it to anyone that's making a book, work together with a book designer. And that's been incredible because we hadn't done it before. I hadn't done it before. I love printing my photographs, but as you said, putting them together and selecting and things like that, it's nice to have an outside perspective, someone who isn't even familiar with your photography, just to look at it from a different way. And then because we came up with this concept of doing more warmer photos and more blue color photos, a lot of the photography that I done immediately was put aside because even though I like those colors a lot, I mean, it's you still it's an easy way to select and leave some things aside. And then we decided to make 2 covers and just have this really. I can show it, but it's not easy to listen to. But so if you go from this side, if you go to it, you have all these more warm tones, and if you go from this side, it's more colder tones. Yeah.
So you could look at the book from either direction.
Or you can just go through it in a slower way, and then you have, you can see a more colder photo and then a warmer photo. Like you said, thinking about how to put them together and what photo works with what, it was a huge process. But you learn a lot, I think.
For sure. That's interesting that you used a book designer. I think that's smart because I think that's where a lot of people, like we're photographers, we don't design books, and that's something I wish I had available to me. How did you go about finding someone to do that for you?
Yeah, I think we're probably lucky that we live in Belgium. I don't know how it is there, but there's still a book culture here and lots of people making books. And I also, I think it was in 22 that I entered contests where you could make a pitch and then in the end for a project. And then they connected you if you won with the publisher.
Oh, okay.
So I talked there and I just knew from that meeting that I wanted a book designer. We didn't go with that publisher. We self-published the book, but you learn so many different things. And I just thought like it would actually help me a lot if I have someone who's looking at it with me, asking the right questions and making decisions and things like that. Because I don't know if that's me, but or if it's just you hear it a lot with creatives, but I doubt myself a lot. Like it just
man, it's the worst, especially when it comes to a book. I mean, that's the hardest part is like having someone else tell you like, yeah, this is looking pretty good, or like someone who has no connection to it whatsoever to just tell you like, yeah, you're on the right track or whatever. I think it's super helpful. Otherwise, it's like I think I'm just gonna put it in the toilet. You know what I
mean? And I also have one of Theo Bosboom's books here, and Sandra Bartocha was also on your podcast and designed that one. So that's also, I really like the book. So you have not only that book, there's others here as well that are where a book designer helped create it. And sometimes you really see the difference. It's not to say that you have to hire a book designer, but it just adds that little extra, maybe filter or I don't know. So really happy with that. And we learned a lot.
That's super smart. So how can people get a copy?
Just through my website.
All right, we'll make sure we'll put a link in there in the show notes. So everyone go get a copy and check it out. I guarantee it's going to be amazing. So let's talk a little bit more about nature. I know that you talk a lot about giving back to nature. That's something that resonates deeply with me as well. What does that look like for you in practical terms in your life and in your photography career?
I think, we tried to do it in as many ways as possible because, travel is, you can do it as sustainable as possible, but it is not sustainable as such. Drive, or we took the ferry. Sometimes you fly if there's a wedding or there's ways to reduce your own footprint. For example, we both eat vegan because, you sometimes hear people say, there's climate change, but I don't know what I can do about it. For the food industry, probably the biggest impact on climate change and the biggest impact you can have as a person, as an individual, is through your food choices. So we made a choice a few years ago, 5 years ago, I think now, and it's actually been so easy. Even in people ask, what do you eat when you're in Scandinavia? It's it's actually super easy, and it starts from there, trying to think what you can do as an individual to just reduce your footprint as much as possible. But then also with the book, creating awareness of things that are things that are happening there. Also for the book we donated, we're making a donation to Rewilding Europe. So for every book sold, we give a part of the profit away. Also because I think that's really important, not only the financial support, but just it is also in the book. It's also on my website, and I then hope people will find that type of organizations themselves and think about it when they're thinking about, oh, what should I ask for my birthday, or or the end of the year I want to make a donation. There's lots of things you can do there, but it's also researching where you're going and seeing what the needs are, or sometimes it's as easy as signing a petition, but it starts from trying to learn more about the environment or the place you're going to, or what's happening around your home, and seeing what you can do. We all wouldn't have a job or a passion if there's no nature left. So I think it's super important to, especially for us, to contribute as much as we can and to do as much as we can to see that whatever is left or is still pristine or can be rewilded again, that we try to do that.
Yeah, as someone who makes all of my income from nature photography, I think about it in terms of having a values-driven approach to everything that I think about in my life, in terms of if that's how I'm connecting to the landscape is through the preservation of nature, then my decision making needs to lead with those values in place, in terms of how I vote, how I show up locally, how I communicate with others, the causes that I'm championing, pretty much everything. And so if when you look at it through that lens, no pun intended, I think it does help give you a little bit more sense of purpose and gives a little bit more clarity in terms of how to move forward on difficult conversations or topics.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's so many things you can do. I see people selling prints and giving some of the profits to a conservation organization, and I know it's not a job where you make a lot of money necessarily. And it's also, it doesn't even need to be a donation. You can also give photos to organizations, or
right,
or post something on Instagram helping organizations raise funds. Or, for example, with our book launch, we put together a Christmas market, and all the we sold some unrelated things from Scandinavian brands, and all the proceeds from that also went to a nature organization. So you can find different things and just try to give back a little.
Yeah, no, I think it's super important. So I had one more topic that I thought might be really fun as a bonus episode for our Patreon supporters. So we'll talk about that, but it's going to be printing things. So if you're excited about printing, tune into that. My last question for you, though, for the main podcast, though, is who are some photographers that inspire you? Who are some people that we need to get to know?
Yeah, first I want to say Feli Hansen. She was also she also entered NLPA, and her project was second, I think. And
amazing.
I think it's one of my favorite projects I've seen, not only this year, but in a long time. And it's not only that project. She has such an eye for light and for details, and so I love her work. So it would be nice if you could get her on.
Yeah, that project blew my mind. If you haven't seen it, it's called Guilty Trashers. And it's basically, I don't completely know how she did it, but basically it's all of this plastic that resembles different landscapes, like volcanoes and icebergs. It's amazing. It's a really amazing, but it's a dialogue about how waste and trash and plastic pollution.
Yeah, and it's actual trash she found in the places she photographed it. So it's not that she at home thought, I will make an iceberg and put it somewhere and photograph it just to talk about this plastic waste. But no, it's actual waste that she found in the places where she made the photos. So it's super incredible.
I mean, I would have been okay with it even if it was created.
Yeah, of course, because it makes you think. No, it's an incredible project. And then second, Amy Vitale. She's the founder of Vital Impacts. She's a conservation photographer. She also works for National Geographic. She's an amazing speaker. There's this one quote from her, and it's really inspired me. And it's inspiration comes from a place of discomfort. She can talk more about it, but I really think it's true, and it's just an inspiring person to talk to, I think. And then the next person is Melissa Schaefer. She's the editor of Mother magazine, which is a magazine that features female storytellers and photographers, but she makes amazing photographs herself. And then also Marcus Vesberg. He's a Swedish photographer. He's also a conservation photographer who works mostly in Africa, but he did a story, I think it was during COVID, about deforestation in Sweden. The photos went around the world, I think, and it was really impactful. And then maybe one last name, Kevin Morgan. He's just a really incredible person. He photographs puffins. His nickname is the Prince of Puffins. And, if you're, if you're looking at him up, he's really nice to talk to. And he has some amazing bird photography.
Awesome. Well, Hanneke, this has been tremendous.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thanks so much to Hanneke for a genuinely thoughtful conversation. If this episode resonated with you, the best thing you can do is support the show on Patreon. For the cost of a monthly print, you can get access to over 240 bonus episodes, including an extended conversation with Hanneke specifically on printing from home, why it matters, how she approaches it, and what it changes about your relationship to your own work. That episode is waiting for you right now. Patreon is what keeps the show independent, ad light, and focused on the kind of depth that we tried to bring today. If you've been on the fence, this is a good time to jump in. And a final reminder, NLPA entries close on May 31st. There are links to everything in the show notes. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.